Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend, Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John.
You doing okay today?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. Now, Sam, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, and you tell me what you think about it. My 84-year-old father, hadn't really touched a weapon of any sort since he was a lieutenant in the Army back in the early 60s. A few weeks ago, he went to Academy Sports, and again, we don't make a market in Academy Sports or anything like that, but bought a 9mm handgun.
Wow.
A 9mm handgun, bought a Beretta. We was over at his house having a cocktail, and he goes, "You want to see what I just bought?" And I go, "Yeah, sure, why not?" He brings it out and shows us. I'm thinking, maybe we shouldn't be showing off handguns and drinking cocktails at the same time. But it was interesting for me because my father has historically hated guns, just absolutely hate them. I mean, he was in the military, saw what they could do. He did not grow up hunting or what have you, so does not like guns. And I said, "Why are you getting this?" And he goes, "John, I'm just scared." I said, "Scared? Scared about what?" And he goes, I don't know. I feel uneasy. I don't exactly know what's going on any longer." And, it's kind of interesting that he would say that. I mean, here I am using my father as kind of a litmus test for fear or a barometer of fear in the country. And if my 84-year-old father is going out there buying 9mm guns, you have to kind of think that perhaps maybe people are as uncertain or fearful about the future as they have been at any time in recent memory.
Well, I think that's hard to argue with just the amount of unrest and socially and even in the economy, even in the stock market, you're seeing just a lot of pessimism, a lot of fear. And I think a good question is, how long is this going to sustain? How long is this going to last? And what really are the root causes of it? Yeah,
because here we are, the first part of September, and we have seen a lot of red ink thus far this month in the stock market. NASDAQ dropping double-digit points. Some measures entering into a corrective state. And all those high-flying tech names that had generated so much performance for investors, all of a sudden, whew, boy, not looking so good. A lot of red ink, and people scared. Is this another tech bubble? Is this? And people are just fearful. Whenever there's some kind of bad news, it's not this is a momentary blip. It seems as though people take everything to maybe the worst case scenario. Is this a change? Do you think perhaps in overall American psyche, or is this sort of a short-term phenomenon? I can tell you from my generation, Gen X. Sitting around taking a look at it, I'm not necessarily terribly worried about the long-term health of the United States. However, short-term, I don't mind telling you, Sam, it kind of concerns me when I see ongoing riots. It kind of concerns me when I see economic policies veer way off to the left and into socialism standards. Yeah. And when I start seeing a lot of constraints on society or what have you, just government mandates or proposals to make everything better and make everyone happy, I start getting a little concerned because that's not what I learned as a child. That is not how the system indoctrinated me back in the day. So the society that we're living in right now is a little bit different than what I was used to growing up, and it makes me a little scared of the future. And you can imagine my father. A whole generation older than I am. If I'm a little scared, at least short term, not long term, but short term, you can imagine that he's possibly petrified. However, you are a younger individual than I am. Just a few years, I think.
Just a few years.
How is Gen Z, Gen X, how are they taking, not Gen X, but Gen Z and millennials, how are they feeling about the future? Is there that same sense of fear, of trepidation, of, I don't know what the future holds?
I think anecdotally, I think it's very split. I think you have a large section that are probably extremely scared, and then I think you have a large section that's not scared at all, and that may be a very general answer, but I think that's kind of the truth. I don't think there's a ton of people that are, maybe a little scared. I think you're getting people kind of on both ends of the spectrum with not a lot in the middle, but I think that's normal. For people to have some sort of fear or fear of loss or whatever that may be. It's kind of a human instinct. It's prospect theory. People hate losses more than they love gains, and that's a inherent thing in humans, and so I think it's normal, and I think it's kind of always going to be the case. It's been interesting, not to just look at it from a market perspective, but the VIX, or the volatility index, or the fear index, some people call it, has been at the highest point it was at a stock market all-time high ever. So the market's saying everything's great, but the fear index is still at the highest it's ever been for when the market's doing that great. And I think that kind of sums up how people have been feeling. Things may not be so bad in their own life, but that fear is still kind of there.
Well, you hit on something right there, whether intentional or not. Things aren't so bad in their own life, but there's still that fear. I would submit, when you take a look at the headlines and we take a look at social media, everyone yelling past each other, worst case scenarios, it's all, going through life with, just blinders on, just everyone's angry. However, in our daily lives, I don't see too many people too upset about stuff. For the most part, people seem to be getting along just fine. I don't see a bunch of people yelling at each other in the grocery. And, it seems as though we're still in a relatively cordial society. So perhaps maybe the fear that we have is being engendered by the media, including the social media, because the people who yell the loudest in social media get the most attention. And the people who say the most outlandish things get the most attention. The headlines that are the most negative will get the most shares and clicks and follow-throughs and what have you. And so perhaps it is just the very nature of our dissemination of information these days that is fostering this increase in fear or uncertainty that many Americans have about the future.
Well, I think you bring up a good point about social media and how these voices that may be a minority of opinions are the ones that are being spoken the loudest. And we've talked about it before a while ago. I'm not sure what the topic was, but it's a small portion of people that are using these social media platforms that are very, very, very vocal. Mm-hmm. It's 80% of all tweets from American adults come from the top 10% of people on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's only about 1 in 5 Americans that have been on Twitter at all. And so when you multiply those together, it's a small percentage of Americans that are being very vocal. It's kind of the vocal minority.
Yeah, and Sam, you bring up a good point about Twitter. And we're not here to knock Twitter.
I love Twitter.
We're not here to knock it, but we opened up a Twitter account and we're relatively active. Kind of partially. For a time being, but it seems as though if you really want to develop a really large Twitter following, you have to do several things. One, you have to devote an extraordinary amount of time to it.
Yeah.
You have to be out there. 2, you have to be willing to pay to get followers. And then 3, you have to be outlandish in order for people to even notice you.
Yeah.
If you get on Twitter, if you get on social media and say, the sun rose in the east this morning and it was a beautiful sunrise, do you know how many people are going to like or share that or retweet it?
None.
Absolutely none. So that's where I think perhaps a lot of this fear is coming from. A lot of this uncertainty is it just simply sells. And I've long said that you sell more umbrellas when it's raining than when it's sun shining outside. And given the way that our media outlets now are competing not just with other local media outlets but with media outlets from around the world, the more outrageous the story, the better it is for ratings. So fear sells. So I think in a large part, the reason why we see 84-year-old men going out and buying 9mm handguns, interestingly enough, he doesn't have any ammunition for it because 9mm ammunition is almost impossible to find, is because we're kind of doing it to ourselves in order to increase our ratings so we can increase our advertising.
So with all this being said, it doesn't sound like this is a trend that's going to change. We took kind of the prospect theory nature of it, the inherent nature of humans, and then we add in the increased selling of fear, I guess, in media and social media outlets. And prospect theory, the inherent part of it's not going to change, and I don't see the media side of it changing much.
Well,
so how is...
Well, I think it's just going to be up to all of us to understand or consider the source. I told you, I used to write a column for the Montgomery Advertiser newspaper for years. And then, the magazine kept on shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and now it's I just didn't bother with it any longer. But every so often, just to make sure people were watching, were reading, I would write something derogatory about Bitcoin. I would essentially troll for Bitcoin fanatics. And I would write something about it, and I'm going to tell you, Sam, I had there's a song from the 80s, The Freaks Come Out at Night. And, the freaks come out when you start talking about Bitcoin. And I had people implying all sorts of strange relationships that I must have, just by the fact that I was not glowing about Bitcoin. And I did that for a reason. I kind of trolled them to see if people would respond. I think people need to, when they're on Twitter, when they're on social media, when they're on the commentary boards of media outlets or whatnot, understand that there are those people or even robots out there that are solely designed to get you angry.
To stir up conflict.
To stir up conflict. Because
both like you said, both real and fake accounts.
Yeah, because it's one of those deals. The more people that are on the FoxNews.com's message board, the better it is for Fox News in order to go to advertisers and say, this is how many people are out there. So you have to understand that in a lot of ways, a lot of this fear-mongering is you're being played.
Yeah.
You're being played by someone who has a vested interest to make sure that you are fearful, that you're on that website, that you're on that social media, that you're liking, that you're sharing, that you're retweeting, because somehow they're skimming a little bit off the top there.
Yeah, exactly.
So do your friends, people in your generation, do they think like this, or is it just an old, fuddy-duddy curmudgeon like me that might be a little bit cynical, but cynical in the fact that, gee whiz, I've never seen people in our country so angry at one another, at least in the headlines, and be so cordial in person. There seems to be a huge dichotomy. If there is the dichotomy, we have to have an explanation for it.
Yeah, there is a huge dichotomy, but I don't see that changing much. It's people are much more comfortable saying these bold opinions, behind the screen, whether they have the account tied to their real name or not.
Yeah.
Even if they do, I still think people are more comfortable, saying some of these bold opinions, throwing things out there to stir up conflict behind a screen, even if it is their own personal account, than they would be in front of a larger group of people.
Well, and that's the thing with social media, and even just traditional media. But with social media, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have done your work in order to have a bold opinion. Heck, you don't even have to have your own name out there.
Yeah.
Back in the day, when I was a younger man than I am today, if you wanted to have a public opinion for the average person, they would have to write a letter to the editor of the newspaper. And the newspaper you had to put down contact information, then the newspaper would actually call you back. I know, because I wrote a couple of letters into the editor. They would call you back verifying that you were who you said you were in your letter and that you wanted to have this published. And so people didn't go out public with bold thoughts unless they absolutely meant it. It was much harder to troll people with fear-mongering.
And there wasn't the impulsive nature that there is now. If I wanted to say something on social media, it takes me the thought and then 30 seconds, and then it's blasted out to anybody who wants to see it.
Yeah, because, how often do we read so-and-so's some headline, so-and-so apologized for something they said on social media?
They send it out there without much thought, If it was like you're mentioning, you had to write something and you had to go through a more formal process. A lot of these things that people end up regretting sending at some point in that process probably would have retracted it or said, maybe this isn't something I should be blasting out there.
Yeah, so I wonder if it doesn't sound like you're terribly optimistic that this is going to change. But if it does change, it's going to have to come from us as the consumers of this stuff. And, if it is going to change, it's going to take a concerted effort on behalf of people like Sam Clement and Gen Z and John Norris and Gen X to sit there and realize that we're being played. Well, to sit there and read the tweet and just say, I'm not taking the bait. I am not falling for this. I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to click through. I'm not going to like it.
I get what you're saying. I don't have a lot of confidence that we'll get there. I think you're right. That is how what would have to happen to get there. But, these people, these accounts know what they're doing. They're playing on human nature. They're playing on things that are so ingrained and wired in people that it's not going to change, or at least in my mind.
Well, you're probably right, unfortunately. And speaking of fear and talking about my father with his 9mm Beretta, this past Saturday, I actually went over to the Academy Sports. Again, we don't make a market in that name or anything like that. Over in Trussville, Alabama. I was over in Trussville at the Home Depot. Again, we don't make a market in that name either. And this is before I went to Sam's Wholesale Club. And by the way, we don't make a market in that either. But I went into Academy Sports to pick up something. Actually, to buy some 12 and 20 gauge shotgun shells in case I go dove hunting this year. And I went to take a look and see whether or not they had any handguns. And the handguns they had were just very limited. And I'm talking about the number of shotguns they have were limited. And this particular store is generally pretty well armed or stocked. And I asked him, I said, what in the world is going on? I'm talking about they didn't have much supply at all, and the ammunition was gone. There wasn't any 9mm ammunition. There wasn't even any 22 long rifle type stuff. I mean, there was nothing in there. It was hard to find the type of shot you would want. Like a 20 gauge 7.5 wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And I asked the people behind the counter, I said, what's going on? I said, people are scared about the election. He goes, no, it's more COVID and the riots. And he goes, when people don't feel good about stuff,
they buy guns.
They buy guns.
At least here.
At least in central Alabama. So I took a look at it and I said, do you even have any 9mm? And they pulled one out and they showed it to me. And I held it in my hand and I was kind of scared by it, frankly. And then I said, we don't even have any 9mm ammunition. I said, when are you going to get any in? He goes, I have absolutely no idea. And he said, I've got mine. And the other person behind the counter said, I've got mine too. And I said, that's the problem. Everyone who's got 9mm ammunition has got it, and no one else does. So I didn't buy the gun, but I think that's a pretty decent reflection of society as a whole, where you can't find ammunition and you can't find guns, and yet you can find as many negative headlines out there. I do say, I'm encouraging everyone that's listening, just don't take the bait all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are people out there who have a vested interest to make you scared and to make you angry because they get paid.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
I don't like it.
I don't like it either. I'm scared of what I just said. I'm fearful. So, Sam, I'm not sure we've really traded perspectives here today, but, it is kind of sad commentary on American society, and I doubt that the U.S. is alone in this. I would imagine this is going on throughout pretty much any society that makes full use of social media and the like. Well, there you have it. Not trading perspectives, but
nope.
At least sharing opinions about why people in the United States are currently as scared as they are. So with that, thank you all so much for listening. We'd love to hear from you also. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know. You can always send us an email to tradingperspectives@oakworthcapital.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. If you're interested in hearing more or reading more of what we have to say, you can check out our blog, Common Sense, at oakworthcapital.com underneath the Thought Leadership tab, along with a lot of other good articles as well. Sam, let us leave here on something that's not so fearful.
That's all I got.
Okay, guys, that's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.